It's summer, 1915. World War I rages on, and you find yourself in a nightmarish reality. You're marching through the unforgiving Khata highlands, devoid of sustenance, your body screaming for relief. You risk a glance behind and are met with a haunting sight. Those who couldn't keep up, lying motionless, or worse, shot where they fell. The Ottoman Empire, a realm that had imposed a blood tax since the 15th century, had committed to an even darker path, the systematic annihilation of its Armenian Christian population. By April of that year, an estimated hundreds of thousands would lose their lives in one of the most horrendous genocides in recorded history. In previous centuries, a fifth of the empire's populace had been Christian slaves, a chilling testament to the ingrained persecution these communities faced. Yet, as the 20th century dawned, their plight took an even darker turn, subjected to life-threatening deportations, civilian harassments, and unimaginable suffering, all in an attempt to amplify Turkish cultural identity. How did a system that once levied a blood tax transition into engineering one of the most terrible genocides? Were these Christians mere pawns in a larger, cruel game of cultural identity, or did they suffer a uniquely horrifying fate of their own? Join us as we dive deep into the harsh and chilling truths behind the Armenian genocide and the long history of Christian oppression in the Ottoman Empire. Welcome to History on Fleek, the horrific unfolding. On the 24th of April, 1915, one of the worst genocides in human history would begin to unravel. The date remains a remembrance day for the Armenian population all over the world. Under the cover of World War I, the Ottoman Empire would embark on a year-long destruction of the Armenian Christian population, which many now consider the first genocide of the 20th century. In the spring of 1915, there were approximately 1.5 million Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire, a robustly multi-ethnic society at the time. Come the autumn of 1916, over 660,000 to potentially as many as 1.2 million of these people were dead. In a rabid pursuit of ethno-religious cleansing, lives were taken through massacre, murder, exposure, ill treatment, and starvation. The Armenian genocide was a systemic effort to expel 1.5 million people from the country through mass deportation, and when this wasn't possible, murder, which would become an inevitable byproduct anyway. What made the genocide so ghastly and potent was its targeting of ethnic Armenian Christians. Victims began to arise with local massacres in the spring of 1915, yet there was a bulk of death through displacement. Deportations all across the breadth of the Ottoman Empire left hundreds of thousands of Armenians facing dehydration, exposure, and disease. Many would die en route through unconscionably huge travels from modern-day Turkey to modern-day Saudi Arabia, Syria, or Iraq. The mass expulsion was not an effort to remove people to live elsewhere. It was to move people irrespective of whether they lived or died. Religion, greed, and innocence lost. The religious element to this targeting of Armenians is an indelible tentpole of the persecution. The Armenian population was Christian at large, under the Armenian Apostolic Church. In the Ottoman Empire, among a population made up predominantly of Muslim Turks and Kurds, this set them apart and made their persecution chillingly viable. That's not to say the circumstance of wartime didn't play a hand in how the genocide played out. Sitting in an enviable wartime position come April 1915, the Ottoman Empire wanted to carry out a long-held desire for Turkification in Anatolia. Long-held is a bit of an understatement. Turkification's history goes all the way back to 6 CE. However, under the Ottomans, desire was to create a single cultural, religious, lingual Turkish region, and ideally of Anatolia. Armenians suffered through this political drive, as deported or murdered persons would have their assets confiscated and redistributed. In the face of this dubious redistribution of wealth, ordinary citizens were incentivized to turn on their Armenian neighbors. Like so many large-scale turns of persecution and murder on ethnic populations across history, this was also fueled by the belief that the Armenian population was a wealthy one. This was all a myth and falsehood. The Armenians in the majority were poor, yet they were persecuted, expelled, and then robbed. Among the hundreds of thousands of Armenians facing deportation and worse, there was inevitably a sizable child population. Many thousands were brought to death at the hands of the Ottoman Empire's cleansing. Yet this wasn't their sole course of action with the youngest. There were thousands upon thousands of Armenian children taken from their families and converted to Islam. The Ottoman authorities were willing to accept those who converted to Islam and offer them the right to remain in their places of residence. It was a long-held goal of the Ottoman regime to convert and assimilate children into Muslim and particularly Turkish society. Yet the Ottoman Empire was a profoundly multi-ethnic geopolitical mass of identity. The Turkification of Anatolia, or anywhere else for that matter, was not met with widespread popularity. Therefore, it shouldn't come as a surprise the mass deportations were not brought to the bustling cities of Izmir or Istanbul. This was partly to hide an ethnic cleansing from a multi-ethnic populace as well as foreigners. It was also remarkably, in considering the victims of this genocide, to hide what was happening from urban Armenians considered suitably assimilated and valuable to the Ottoman Empire. Marching to death. Out of all the death and destruction the genocide brought, the forced marches were without a doubt the most brutal of methods. Accompanying the deprivation of food and water, many Armenians were forced to walk their way to the Syrian desert. These would be titled appropriately. These were death marches. There can be no question that the conditions of the long travel itself were enough to endanger the lives of Armenians. Yet the troubles they faced along the way were often more perilsome. Entire droves of the elderly, women and their families, alongside exhaustion and deprivation, faced attacks from civilians, criminal gangs, nomads, and even local officials. This meant people could be robbed, stripped of their clothing, and searched for valuables. They could be extorted, and worse. In many instances, young women faced abduction and sexual violence. The Armenians walking through the desert were lambs to the slaughter. There were holding camps for the Armenians to reach at the end of their travels. But, as you can only imagine, hundreds of thousands simply didn't make it. Most lives were taken through the brutal conditions of a deprivation-based death march. Yet many were abducted, killed, while others took their own lives. There was nowhere to turn, and evidently, no one to trust. Some civilians would go out of their way to help and aid the convoys of Armenian deportees, though many more would choose to harass or outright murder them. Disturbingly, the lion's share of deportees were families, slogging through harsh terrain without food or water. They were made to endure the travel rather than face execution. However, any who fell behind from exhaustion were either left to die or shot for not keeping up. The length and enormity of these marches are difficult to articulate with just words. Some Armenians faced a forced walk of over 600 miles in what was peak summer heat in the Eastern Hemisphere. Why exactly isn't easily discerned, but there was a disparity in how deportees were handled. Those departing from Western Anatolia, where they could, were allowed to reach Syria by rail. Those departing from Eastern Anatolia were not. This shows in the final figures. Armenians who survived and reached Syria were almost entirely from Western Anatolia. Those from the east were nearly wiped out entirely. The most stark example lies in those departed from Erzurum. Nearly 99% never made it to Syria. So who exactly was behind this slow slaughter of at least 500,000, and to many estimates, likely many, many more? The ruling government at the time was under the administration of the Committee of Union and Progress, formerly known as the Young Turks. They would orchestrate the Ottoman authorities and auxiliary troops to perpetrate the majority of deportation and mass killings. That isn't to say they didn't get open assistance from many civilian parties, aiming to make Muslim and Turkish dominance the picture of Anatolia. Eliminating the Armenian population was their core path of action. The central government of Constantinople would order officials across the region to conduct mass shootings and deportations. Military and security forces would murder most Armenian males of conscription age, while women and children in the majority were sent to march to the desert. Lingering scars. In an incredible testament to the human spirit, Armenians facing these conditions showed a remarkable capacity for survival and adaptation. There would even be an underground resistance led by Armenians in Aleppo, who would save many lives and aid numerous deportees. Despite a year of persecution and deprivation at the start of 1916, over 500,000 deported Armenians were alive in Mesopotamia and Syria. The Young Turk government feared that these same Armenians would return after World War I was over, so massacres were ordered in February of 1916. Often in remote parts, such as the Habur Valley and around Deir ez-Zor, over 200,000 Armenians were killed from March to October 1916. The locations were chosen to keep the bodies out of public way in view. Tragically, the massacres took the lives of the incredible survivors of those who reached the camps in Syria. Akin to persecuted identities across history, this genocide would have a profound effect on the Armenian population, and a global diaspora of Armenians would result. Survivors would be scattered across the world. To this day, quite understandably, the history and events are a raw point of diplomatic sensitivity and significant tension between Armenia, Turkey, and other geopolitical relations across the world. In a stance that would only block any form of reconciliation or healing, the Turkish government's stance has always been denial. The official line from the Turkish government has been that a genocide never took place. According to this narrative, the colossal and coordinated death toll was a result of civic unrest and civil war. There may be a course for hope, though. Despite complex geopolitical relations making this never likely, many nations have come around to the aid of the Armenian identity. In the face of Turkey's denial, some 31 countries from around the globe have officially recognized the genocide as such. Much of Europe, South America, the US, and Russia have passed resolutions in the name of its recognition. These countries are backed by Pope Francis and the European Parliament. It goes to show that, with enough time and enough honesty, even the hardest of truths can begin to be faced. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.